Hey everybody, Kevin Hoagland here, and I have to tell you, when the interview with Chris Ralph was over, I went back and I started to edit, and I realized that because of some technical issues, I was out of the room for a few minutes trying to get everything fixed, and Kevin and Chris were having a conversation. It is so good, I cannot edit it out and start the show like I normally would. So, what I've done is without any lead in or anything else, we're just going to pick up in Kevin and Chris's conversation and go from there. I hope you enjoy this interview with Chris Ralph, professional prospector and mining engineer, and one of the greatest guys I've ever met. Enjoy.
At gold there, just look on XYZ River and just find the first open spot. Well, that's got to be perfect. And they don't think about where you're looking at this and you can check that off and this
Right.
and the location and the flow and the more things you get to pinpoint, the better off you're going to be. Trying to get, and then it's overwhelming. So it goes from, well, I just found the first spot to, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was this difficult to get a claim.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people that it's not like it's something that's so difficult the average guy can't do it, but it's
Right.
not something that's so difficult that the average or anybody can do it and learn everything you need to know in 10 minutes.
Right.
It doesn't work. It's way more complex than that. I tell people that there are entire books written on claim staking. There are entire books written for lawyers to deal with mining claim laws. And so,
Right.
yeah, there's some complexity to it, but that doesn't mean that the average guy, if you put some effort into it and learn about it, yeah, it's very doable.
Yeah.
The one
Yeah.
thing I tell people too is I always tell people, don't think about getting a claim until you have enough prospecting skills that you could evaluate the claim for yourself.
Right.
If
Right.
you're going to buy a claim from somebody, but you're going to have to really just trust what the guy who's selling it tells you, because you don't have the background to be able to go out and decide for yourself. Then you really aren't ready yet.
Right. Yeah. See paper hanger.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's the thing that Kevin and I were.
See buyer beware.
Yeah. Oh, road. But it was a
No.
cool exercise to go through the research to actually find the spot, even though we determined it wasn't viable. But to go through that process was really cool.
There's actually ones up, well, in various places, but Allegheny is one of them, where they had a good idea where the channel was, although there was 100 or 200 feet of flow on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
volcanic rock, and they'd put down a shaft. They'd just go up there and put down a vertical shaft, and when they hit the gravel or the bedrock or whatever, then they'd go out and put other horizontal workings trying to find the bedrock gravel contact where of course the most of the gold is. But
Kevin told me,
you guys aren't looking to do something on that kind of scale.
nope, we're not really sure yet. Hold on a second. Is that okay, Kevin?
It is
Okay, good.
Sound is better.
much better.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had my face kind of to the side of the mic, Kev.
Okay. Kevin, you're also getting some echo back in out of your headphones. I don't know what you've got on for your headphones. Are you
I just
using
have my earpiece in. Let me try
one
this.
of the two earpieces or
No, no, no. It's just my wired earpiece, the one I always use.
okay, all right.
Let me
Okay.
uh let me unplug it and plug it in again. Is that did you notice any change?
I could hear a change.
Yeah, there's definite change. That's what it needed. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
sure.
Answer your question, Kevin. Are you guys really looking at doing that on that type of a scale?
We're looking at getting. I want to step up the game. I've we're trying to get something where we could certainly file a notice of intent, but ultimately to file a plan of operation and actually do something. So yes, I'm going to try to get together with possibly four people and do something at a larger scale. Yep.
All right. We still have a little bit of an echo. I'm sure I can deal with it in post. I'm not going to worry about it that much.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Chris, we are totally recorded. There is nothing that is live. So, at any time, if anybody needs to take a break or if they need to cough or they need to do this, don't worry about it. 4, 3. Welcome back to the On the Gold podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Hoagland, and today we are speaking with Mr. Chris Ralph, Professional Prospector. Chris, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Hey, I've been looking forward to this for a while.
I before we actually got on the air, I was talking to Kevin and just talking about Chris Ralph and the wellspring of information that you are and how approachable you are. I feel honored to have you here, and I'm glad that you were able to come in and spend some time with us because when it comes to education, I consider you in that top 2% of the greatest educators in this industry. Thank you so very much for being here.
You're making me blush here. And,
Yeah,
you
that was
know,
his intent the whole
trust
time.
me, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And I go out there and sometimes I do good. And sometimes I get skunked. It just, that's the way prospecting is. Nobody bats 1,000 in the world of prospecting.
Absolutely. No, there is no such thing. And I think it's great that we all, I think all of us that have been doing it for any time will just simply say we have really good days and we have really, really bad days. But we always, we're always looking for that next shovelful. That next shovelful is where something's going to be found.
Yep.
That brings me right up to the very first question that I have for you. You recently had a couple of very good finds, and I have to say this: Chris Ralph's YouTube channel, everything that he does is professional prospector, and that is exactly what Chris is. He is a professional prospector, and I say that because I want to kind of get into some of these finds that you've had, and really see if there's a lot you can talk about or a lot that you will talk about as far as the most talked about one in the inner circle was a recent sell. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. One of the things I do that's maybe a little bit different is that I stake mining claims with the intent not of selling it to another individual prospector, but with the intent of selling it to mining companies and companies that will do exploration on the property on a larger scale. And the mining companies will buy properties for a lot higher amount of money, but they're looking for something different, something that an individual, may not be able to do anything much with, but a big open pit mining company could come in and really make a difference. So I was doing some research and just kind of got to looking at some things, and it was just one of those things where I was just looking at old reports and trying to think of something that sounded interesting. And it was suddenly I saw this little thread, and I just started chasing the little pieces of the thread, and it all kind of came together. It was basically looking at some things that were, a little bit unusual for Nevada. It's called a volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit. And it's not like there's none of these in Nevada. There's two that have been mined historically, but they tend to occur in groups. And I couldn't find where anybody had ever really done any serious pursuit in the ones that had been mined, about whether there might be other ones nearby, because normally there are other ones nearby. Now, these are the kind of deposits that form on the bottom of the ocean. If you've seen some of the deep sea dive stuff where they have these black smokers,
Oh yeah.
that the black smoke comes out of the ground. Well, you may not think of it, but that black smoke is sulfides.
Right.
It's a mixture of pyrite and zinc sulfides and other things, copper sulfides. And so basically over a long period of time, that smoke, it settles out just like other stuff settles out of the air. The stuff settles out of the water, and over thousands of years builds up a big thick deposit of these sulfides, some of which, like I say, are more than just pyrite. They have significant copper, zinc, lead, and other metals in them. So anyway, there was one that had been mined in northern Nevada that when they mined it, the ore that they took out ran over 10% copper, which is super high grade because a lot of the big open pits in Arizona, those things run on 0.5% or less.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Copper. Yeah, and this thing was 10%, more than 10%. So anyway, we went, and me and a partner went out and looked at it, and we noticed looking on Google Earth that there were little scratchings in the area, and so we went out there and took samples of some of the dumps from these little scratchings and started looking at the rocks around there, and all the rocks were real positive indicators, and the samples came back with low levels, nowhere near mineable levels, but they came back with indicator levels of copper and other metals, some small amounts of silver, and even a few traces of gold. So we staked a block of claims with the idea that these other areas were right along trend. There's actually a fault zone that the one that was mined, it was mined that had the 10%, that was mined in the 1960s. It's right along trend with that there were some of these other workings and other indications that there might be other deposits nearby. And then it was not last summer, but summer before last, after we had sold it, the company actually hired another geophysical prospecting outfit, and they came with basically what's a giant metal detector mounted on the underside of a helicopter,
Right.
and flew over these things. And sure enough, I mean, they can see these bodies of sulfides, because some sulfides conduct to a certain level. If you have a real sensitive VLF and you're out there, I'm sure you've experienced finding chunks of galena and other things, if you're hunting around old mine dumps especially. Anyway, they came out with this helicopter and about a 30-foot diameter coil and flew over it, and they found a couple of what seemed to be ore bodies of this volcanogenic massive sulfide lying right along the trend that the one that was mined in the 60s had. So anyway, it's an exciting thing. They're going to get out there. They did one hole, and they did it last winter at a time when there was snow on the ground, and they had problems, and they couldn't get to where they wanted to drill the hole, and they drilled one hole and they didn't hit anything, so they kind of backed off and decided they'd do a little regrouping and some more testing, and they did some more testing this last spring, and that additional testing came back just as positive as the first stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. It could be a really big thing. They just need to put in some more holes and confirm that the geophysical indicators that are saying that there's a deposit there are, they need to put a drill hole down and prove that it's there.
I want to go back a little bit because you were talking about reports, and let's talk about how you do your research a little bit, because this, to me, research is everything. Living in Arizona, the middle of the summertime, it's 120 degrees. That's when I sit down to do my research, and I dig back as far as I can. What are some of the sources that you use that are accessible to just about anybody, where they could get some really good meat to look at some of these old areas?
The first thing I start off with is just old county and state reports. In Nevada, they have quite a few county and other reports that are written, and they have some other information online that you can find out directly from the Nevada Bureau of Mines from their website. There's not actually a published. They have a lot of unpublished stuff, that just information that they've accumulated over the years, but they put it online, so you can find that stuff and just kind of go through some of the testing that they've done. And actually, what got me on this particular one was a nearby working that that originally, I guess, was worked in the 60s for mercury, but they took the Bureau of Mines went out there and they were taking general samples, and they took some samples, and sure enough, the samples came back as having significant indicator levels of copper in them. and we started going out there, and based on that, we looked differently at these old scratchings and little prospect pits that had been done, decades and decades ago. And that's kind of just what got us started thinking, oh, this is not a mercury mine. This is the top of a system that has copper underneath.
Nice. So when you're doing your research, if you're going to be looking for gold and you want to look in a particular area, you're not necessarily just looking for old gold mines. You're looking at an overview of everything that's gone on.
Yeah. In any kind of sampling that they've done or indications, because sometimes, everybody has looked at something as X, and then you get out there and look at it, and it's like, no, that's not X, it's Y.
Exactly.
And that's what we did with this one. There's this one prospect that we were interested in had been worked for mercury, and sure enough, when I did samples out there, I got trace levels of mercury too. But we started looking at it. The geology is not right. It's something different, and that's when we kind of put a different spin on it and saw it as something different than what everybody had looked at in the past.
When you're looking at something and you don't ever go out looking just for X, do you? I mean, you're always open to looking for Y and the whole. And
yeah, I'm always
else.
open for looking for anything that seems to be uh, something different or seems to be something that might be worthwhile. I look at silver deposits too. A while ago I was just reading an old report about a silver mine in Nevada, and I stumbled upon a mention in this report where the guy says, "Oh yeah, when they were working this thing in the 1800s, they produced some really spectacular specimens of native silver." It's like, "Oh really?" So, and I looked through some other references that I have that list native silver in Nevada. Guess what? None of the other ones mention this mine. So it's not easy to get to, but it's one of the things that's on my list for this next spring when the weather warms. Is I've got to get out there and see if I can't find some of that nice native silver that was in this silver mine.
Nice. Oh, I'd love to see pictures of that.
I'm
I was
hoping
just
that
going to
I'm
say that.
successful, but you never know. You go out someplace and maybe they hit a pocket and it just didn't, that was it. I don't know. There wasn't enough detail in the report, but it certainly sounds good. And the guy who wrote the report went out of his way to say that there was attractive, nice looking specimens. It just wasn't, oh, there was some native silver here. It was, oh, they produced nice specimens of native silver. So we shall see.
That's anytime I ever find a report that talks about this gold was really pretty, this gold was crystalline, this
Right.
gold was this gold was
Right.
that. Those are the ones that get me excited because obviously it excited them enough to give a little bit more information.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I've also found, and one of the things that I found, if I'm working in a particular area and I'm starting to look for old reports, there was an area that I was working in about 5 years ago. There were 17 mines, all hard rock mines in that area, and you could only find reports on two of them. And that actually got me very, very excited as well because that told me there was a lot of work going on that people just weren't talking about, and it worked out pretty well.
I've seen stuff like that too, where you go in and you see mention of one or two or three mines, and then you look at Google Earth and there's like big workings spread all over the place. And it's like,
Hmm.
whoa, whoa, there was a lot more work than what was described in that report. And
Yeah,
that is always a positive thing.
and I always put that back to a lot of the prospectors and miners really were pretty quiet. There wasn't everything blasted out.
Yeah, no, when I find something, it's not like I go out and start screaming, hey, you
No.
know. I've only done that actually once in my entire life. And it was when I was in West Africa with a metal detector company, and we were there to train people. And we went out. They took us out to some old farm field, and actually there was an old bull there, and you could see the stalks of corn where they'd had corn planted. I mean, the remnant stalks on the ground, and So we went out and tested things, and after about 15 minutes, I found a little specimen that probably had about 3 pennyweight of gold in it. And so I screamed and had everybody come over and showed them, hey, look, we found gold here. And sure enough, like 10 minutes later, one of the local guys found like a half-ounce piece. And then some other guy found one that was a couple of pennyweight. And literally, it was like a gold rush because we had to go. We had a schedule of places we were going. And as we were driving the road out, there was all these guys with metal detectors strapped to their back on little motorcycles going, heading back into where we were. And we got a phone call from one of the guys that were out there and said that after we left, they found another 2.5 ounces that afternoon.
That has to feel rewarding. I've been in those situations before, and probably some of the same areas that you've been. But
Yeah.
to me, it's very rewarding when you're able to help somebody like that. And then when you're driving off, you have started that gold rush. There's people out there, and they're literally changing their lives.
Yeah, when I went back the second time, I asked one of the guys that was with us on that first trip, that was with us on the second trip that I was on, said, "Hey, whatever happened out there?" And he said, "Oh, you should see that area now. It's all nothing but holes." So I turned some farmer's field into a bunch of holes, craters.
Yeah, but I bet
But
that
a lot
farmer
of
got
gold
a
was
nice.
found.
Yeah,
A lot
and
of
I
gold
bet
was
that,
found.
and I bet that farmer got a little bit of a percentage out of that one.
I'm
So,
sure he got something out of it.
well, we've talked a lot about how you're looking at these areas and some of the research that you're doing. I guess there's one question, because I'm sure that there are people listening to this right now that are saying, "Well, I'm not a geologist. I'm not a mining engineer. I don't have 40 plus years of experience. Do I have to be a Chris Ralph to be able to get out and really be able to find gold?"
And I would say absolutely, absolutely not. And one of the things that I should mention is that a lot of the stuff that I've learned and things have come from reading books and reports on the internet and that kind of stuff. You know, uh, my college gave me a great background. I understand something about minerals and rocks and that kind of stuff. But you know what? You could teach yourself that stuff. And then the rest of the detailed stuff on ore deposits and how ore deposits form and stuff, that's kind of stuff I've taught myself. So you don't need to start out with a PhD in geology, but you need to be willing to study and learn and have a certain level of curiosity and want to get out there and make a discovery and have the drive to do that.
If you were to recommend one book on geology that anybody could pick up and read, and we're not talking about fourth year book of geology, what would be a
Yeah,
book that you would recommend?
ooh, that's a hard question, Kevin, because I've picked up so much little bits of this and that here and there. Um, if you wanted me to say a book that's suitable for the average prospector, not for the guy who has a PhD,
Right.
I hate to say this, but it'd be my book.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because if you didn't, I was going to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, man. I set you up for that one
I was
because,
going to say that was a softball question.
yeah,
I
exactly.
wasn't interpreting it that way. I was trying to figure of something else, but it's like, if you're getting started, that's a great place to start. But in that book, I have like a list of recommended books in the back of it. I recommended people, if you really want to, get involved in this, get a book, there's a number of handbooks of rock and mineral handbooks that'll, has pictures in it and will teach you about rocks and minerals and give you the basics, and you have to read those and then go out and look at stuff.
Yes, you do. This is a shameless plug, and I don't even care. Fistful of Gold, the original copy that I was sent by Chris.
You got one of the very first ones. I mean, it was within one or two or three. I don't remember which one went to which person, but you were in the first couple of copies that were
Ap-
made.
and I so appreciate that. I'm very proud to have both of the copies that you sent me, because I have a published copy,
Right.
and I still have the one that looks like you ran it off on a printer through a black and white cover on it, that was all, it was just all printer paper. bound it
Yeah.
up and shipped it off to me. And that's when I read that book, when I read through that, my first thought was this now takes the place of at least 8 or 9 publications that have been made over the years that we've recommended. So, Fistful of Gold. If you are a prospector, if you're getting into prospecting, if you want to get into prospecting, or if you're there and you have been here and you're not feeling like you're getting over that next level, if you don't own this book, you need to. There from page 1 to the very end of it, it is what you need to know. It is an educational textbook written in a way that when you get done with a chapter or you get done with something, you're going to get it through osmosis because you're going to enjoy what you read. You're going to understand what you read. And when it's all said and done, you're like, oh, yeah, I got that. I can do this.
Thank you. Just very kind of you to say.
It is the best book that I've ever read. And yes, I did softball you. I was setting you up for that one. But it is something that is so very, very important. It is a great book. And I truly appreciate the fact that you brought that out as a training tool to help people. So,
I just reached a certain point where I wanted to do something, and I thought, I mean, I have copies of everybody else's books too, and I thought I could do this a little better, and so I spent a long time working on it, but I'm happy with the result.
well, I got to tell you, man, you didn't do it a little bit better. You did it by leaps and bounds. I've never put that book in somebody's hands that they haven't gained an incredible amount of knowledge from it in a very, very short period of time.
I have people telling me sometimes I'll be out in the field talking to prospectors, and they'll tell me something that's like, hey, you know something that not very many people know. And then I find out, oh, you read it in my book. It's like, okay.
That's got to be rewarding.
Yeah, it is kind of funny.
Yeah. Sticking with that, I understand that you're going to be doing a number of the GPA Golden Treasure shows this year.
I'm doing 3. I usually do more than that, but
Right.
as I was telling the other Kevin on the pre-show that my wife and I booked a vacation before I found out when the shows were, and we paid for it, and it wasn't cheap, and so I'm going to miss the Phoenix show, which I always go to, and the Albuquerque show. But I'm going to be there for Pomona and Vancouver and Butte.
Butte, good old Butte, the
Yeah.
copper place.
Yeah, no, that's a great place. Actually, was just in Butte a few weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah, I took a little trip out. My wife went with me. I got invited to go up to a gold and sapphire mine up there by Helena, which is about an hour out of Butte.
Mm-hmm.
And we went up there and spent a couple of days with the owner and just had a great time.
I actually think I know the area that you're talking about.
Yeah, there's an area northeast of Helena where there's a series of gravel bars along the Missouri River that produce gold, but also have sapphires and even a little bit of garnet in the concentrates.
That's fun. Did you?
Yeah, it was great.
Shifting back and staying
Sure.
back to that during the GPA Golden Treasure shows, the ones that you're going to be at.
Yep.
Which I don't know. I think I almost have to get take a picture of you at one of them, create a flat Chris. We can just stand up in a podium, and put it in the ICMJ booth and just always make sure that we have you there. You are doing a new presentation this year called the 25 Indicators.
Yep.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's based on an article I did about 4 or 5 years ago, just 25 indicators for gold that every prospector ought to know. And so the presentation is basically a quick discussion of 25 indicators that point toward gold either being right there or very nearby that you ought to know and understand in order to be a better prospector. And each one, I got a picture or two explaining it, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. And they're set up 10 natural geologic indicators, 5 indicators related to hard rock mining, and 10 more indicators related to placer mining. So a total of 25. I just actually gave the presentation for the first time last night. I got invited to the Comstock Gold Prospectors Club, and so I put this presentation together and thought, oh, I'll give it a dry run and put it out on the local guys here and see what they think. And it was well received, so I think that it'll be well received at the GPA Gold shows. I hate to miss the ones I miss, but you know,
Well, I'll take some video.
other commitments.
Yeah, well, you told me where you were going to go on your vacation, and quite frankly, I would not trade anything in the world to miss that vacation. I think.
Yeah, no.
I think that came out right. Yeah.
Yep.
So, common indicators.
You want to do all 25? You want to just do some? What do you want to do,
No,
Kevin?
I'll tell you what. Let's talk about some of the most uncommon indicators that people simply see, but they don't see.
Okay. One of the ones that I went over last night that I know a lot of people miss and don't see is old mill sites at hard rock mines. A lot of people think of mill sites, hey, they crushed up all the rock there, so what? Uh, I've had some really good luck. If you go up, almost all mills are oriented so that they can use gravity to help them move the material through the process, right? It just makes things so much easier on the life of the people in the mill to have gravity helping them rather than fighting it. So up at they usually have a hillside, and they'll go up to the top of the hill and put the ore into a hopper of some sort. And it's around those places, especially at mills that did custom work, that you'll find spillage on the ground. They were trying to shovel material into a hopper and stuff falls on the ground. And sometimes there'll be piles where they did testing out of and that sort of thing. And some friends and I have had excellent luck going through those piles and finding nice specimens with metal detectors.
Oh yes. Those that is one thing that I always look for, and I carry a really high frequency detector with me at all times to be able to pick up some of that small stuff. But I also carry a Falcon. I carry a Falcon detector with me just about everywhere I go.
And the Falcon is a great tool. It really is.
It is. It's a great tool at 300 kilohertz. I absolutely love sitting down on ore dumps and just I'll look into the adit of a mine and look at the different material. I always, whenever I'm talking about it, I kind of translate it into colors of red, blue, green, and yellow. And when I start looking at the ore dump, I say red, blue, green, not a lot of yellow. So that tells me that was the material that they were pulling out. And I start finding those on the ore dump, throwing them in a bucket, and then I'll just check them with the Falcon. The ones that hit, I throw in one. The rest of it, I toss back out to the side. And I'll go home and crush that. And I've done very well. And then same way at mill sites.
Yep. But, and the place to look at the mill is the top where they put the material in.
Right.
Another one that goes with that is roads that seem to go to nowhere. In a lot of placer, or a lot of mining districts, placer or not, hard rock, whatever, there's a core area where most of the work took place. And then there's periphery that heads out from there. And a lot of times, you may be someplace and see, oh, there's a faint little road that goes off over there. Wonder where it goes. And actually, you can do this just on Google Earth. You can follow it. And a lot of times, these little roads that seem to go to nowhere in an old mining district go to some old prospect that somebody was working on. And some of those little old prospects can be very good because they didn't get the same level of attention that some of the bigger workings got. So that was one of my secrets is roads that seem to go to nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that up around the hydraulic pits up north of us, where you'll see little areas where they were test washing.
Yep, and I've actually seen some where they did some test washing outside the pit, and I've gotten gold in the test wash area, and then just the downslope right below that test wash is an area where maybe the old river was, but it's mostly been washed away. There's not any actual gravel left. And I know of a place up in California where this was took place, and that little slope of a hill just down from the area they worked actually was a lot of big nuggets on that little hill, but there's no actual gravel. It just is a hill adjoining to the gravel.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my little secrets was stacked rock. Um, a lot of times you'll go out in places and the rock is just tossed. You have I'm distinguishing between where they actually stacked the rock carefully and made a wall, as opposed to they threw it on a pile. Um, and where they stack the rock in if you're in a drainage, that sort of thing, it means that they had limited room to work. And a lot of times those stacked walls will actually be stacked on virgin gravel because they just didn't have the room. They didn't work on one side, and then, they have to put the rock somewhere as soon as they start digging. And so they stack it up on a wall. And some of these little walls are actually built on small areas, small runs of virgin gravel that have some pretty good gold in them.
All right, everybody, you have just gotten 3 incredible indicators of where to find gold. And if you're not doing these, you should be. But those 3 things that Chris just talked about have nothing to do with geology. You don't even need to understand you have to understand the basics of geology. But the 3 things that he just named off, 3 very well used things by those of us that have been out there for a long time that have done pretty good. Hey, I want to go a different direction real
Okay.
quick because I want to ask one question here.
Right.
Stacked walls have been so good to me over the years, and finding, as you said, the virgin areas, or in some cases places where they were throwing stuff up on top of the flat on that area, and they just didn't get it all. Now, I'm going to go over to hard rock for just a moment, and this is absolutely not telling anybody to go inside of a mine, to go inside of a hard rock mine.
No.
Chris has a lot of experience underground. I have a lot of experience underground, but I want to throw something out. The last underground that I was in was they had worked the material as they did a drift off to the out of the main shaft, and they were breaking the material, and they were just letting it fall behind them as they worked up.
Right.
And they got up so high and they stopped. And when I looked at the project, my first thought was, let's treat this the way we do a hand stack wall. Let's see about moving this material and see what they left going down. And it was amazing what they had left in there as far as going down. Of course, it was had to be much richer going up. But
Are you talking about areas that they worked below the adit level, or just areas that weren't worked below the adit level?
Areas that were not worked below the adit level.
Generally speaking, I'll tell you, this is a mining engineering thing. That it's that having gravity work with you, so that if you work from a level up, no problem, gravity pulls the rock down to
Right.
you. But if you do what they call underhand stoping, which is going downward from the level that you're working on, it's way more work. And in fact, usually miners, if there's something good on the underside, they'll actually put down a shaft or a winze and then come back in underneath and have gravity again working in their favor. It has to be really rich for them to work stuff that's below the level. And so a lot of times some good stuff they'll leave behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was lucky enough to where, with today's technology and the way these guys were working this, they were easily able to pull out that material and create a line across there, that barrier line that allowed them to go down. And boy, they hit a couple of really nice pockets. And I enjoyed that one because I was in that one for a percentage, and that wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. I'm not advocating ever going into a mine shaft in any way,
Right.
shape, or form. Before they actually had me come out and start looking at it, they had already gone in. This was an old mine going back into the 1800s. They had secured it. They had made sure everything was absolutely totally safe before even picking up the phone and doing anything else. So,
Yeah, old mines, there's a slide in my presentation that says stay out and stay alive.
been there, done that. And I've spent a lot of, you've spent so much more time underground than I have, but there comes that point where your gut tells you there's no reason for you to even step into that adit.
Yeah. Yep.
But there's a lot of opportunities outside of that adit. There's a lot of opportunity.
Oh yeah, no, there's worlds of opportunities that you don't have to go inside. One of the lessons that I learned early on when I was literally a brand newly minted mining engineer, they had me working with an old miner, and there was actually another young engineer that was with me, and the old miner said, "Here, beat on this rock here," and you could see a crack in the side of the adit, the side of the drift there, and he said, "Well, pop that thing out," and me and that other guy beat on it for like 10 or 15 minutes, and it didn't budge an inch. And he said, "Don't worry about it, we'll come back." And so like a week or two later, maybe 2 weeks later, the guy said, "Beat on that thing again, see what you can get it to do." And we beat on it again for 10 or 15 minutes, and still nothing. And then another couple weeks go by, and the guy stops in the same spot with us and says, "Okay, watch this." And you could see that the crack had grown from being, a 16th of an inch wide. It was now more than a quarter of an inch wide. And the guy stuck a bar in there and just flip and literally out popped this 300-pound boulder. It was like, and I learned right then that, stuff that may have been totally safe and okay in 1905 it could be really dangerous now. So
dangerous or deadly?
Deadly, yeah. If that 300-pound boulder would have fallen on you, you'd still be there.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, you would be. And I almost I do want to talk about some of the safety aspects of this, and we can talk about not going into that adit, not being around that adit, but also let's take that over into placer mining and some of the things that happen when people just. I'm going to blame a case of gold fever for it, and there was somebody that posted a picture on the internet not too long ago while they were coyote holing a really stupid spot to be, and I've called them out on it, so I'm not saying anything that is going to be a shock. But they were coyote holing in a really bad spot, and right above it in the picture was a boulder about the size of a 55-gallon drum.
I know a story back in the days when dredging was legal in California and I know where this boulder is still sitting there. There's a boulder that's probably 15 feet in diameter, which is huge. It's bigger than a van. And the guy started dredging in behind it, and he was getting really good gold. And he kept dredging to the point where he was underneath the thing to his waist. In other words, he was head in underneath, and the boulder was not sitting on bedrock. So it was sitting on about a foot of loose gravel, and he was head in underneath that thing. And I told the guy, "You trying to kill yourself or something?" But he couldn't resist because he showed me a nugget he got out of it that was close to an ounce, and he was getting all kinds of smaller stuff in with it. This boulder was in a perfect place. It was right on an inside bend in the North Fork of the Yuba. It was an awesome spot, but yeah, how much gold is worth your life?
Oh man! And when I hear stories like that, or when I see things like that, I just remind people, God was sitting on that rock at that particular time. But if he turned his back and looked at something else, you could have been done.
Yeah.
It doesn't even take a huge boulder to knock you out of commission when you're 4 miles in, and that rock that was the size of a bowling ball just broke your ankle.
Yeah.
Or the one that's the size of a softball drops on your head, and you don't even know who or where you are.
Right.
Yeah. So I bring that up because that is such a valuable lesson. And you can hear it from just about everybody. there is a safety factor that you have to be aware of at all times that you're out there. If you have a bad case of gold fever, I always tell you just go and sit down for a little while. Just let it, just calm down. You see a little bit of gold, you still need to be safe. You still need to think about what you're doing. It's simply not worth your life. Now, opportunities outside of an adit. What are things that you're going to look for when you're outside of an adit? Because they sank a shaft on that vein. They were going down. They were working that material. First off, what do you do to tell whether it was a gold mine or just a base metals mine or something in those lines? If you don't have a report.
Normally I'm looking for, recognizable minerals in whatever vein or other deposit that I come across. So, am I going to see remnants of pyrite? Am I going to see blues and greens from copper minerals? Am I going to see black sooty stuff that looks like it was probably silver mineralization? Am I going to see lead or sphalerite, zinc, or things like that? So that's where having a little bit of background and being able to recognize some sulfide minerals, it can be helpful. You walk up on something, and then the problem is you don't necessarily think. Sometimes people don't think that gold may be with other things. In fact, last night at that Comstock Prospectors meeting, we were talking about a little stream that drains a mining area in Nevada, and the club has a claim there, and the stream has gold in it, but there's no gold mines there. There are some really nice silver mines upstream, and they have a little copper and some little bit of lead and zinc, but surprise, the mines did produce some gold, and over the years it's concentrated, and there's a placer deposit in this stream. It's not super duper rich, but it's one of the few places in Nevada where you can dredge because there's water there.
I'm on my way.
Join the club.
I really want to get my dredge in the water, and our monsoon rains that we had here in Arizona, man, I'll tell you what, I could not get out during our 3-day dredging season that we had here.
This thing actually has water year round.
Oh my.
And although in the spring and the early part, that water flows so fast, and I've seen it like this because I've been up there to that area once. You couldn't walk across that stream because that water would knock you down. And then you'd go flying.
All right. Oh yeah.
But in the summertime, it slows way down. It's very nice, and I'm sure the water's still really cold, but it's sure a lot warmer in July than it is in May. But there's still water. There's still water in July and August.
Yeah, I think next year in July I'll be dredging in Alaska, and as much as I love to dredge in Alaska, the one thing I don't like is that 36-degree water.
Yeah, you need a dry suit for that stuff.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, man. Dry suits scare the heck out of me. I had a Viking dry suit years ago.
Yeah.
And I managed to rip it while I was underwater. It got hung on a really sharp rock.
Ooh.
And you have no idea. I mean, until you experience that,
yeah,
you have no idea how fast a dry suit will fill up full of water, and you suddenly realize that, oops, I'm in trouble. Dry suits scare me. There's some places I'll use my dry suit, and other places where I just won't. But no, I agree. A dry suit, if you're working cobbles and you know that that's it, not a problem. I love it.
Hey, you went up to visit Kib Cannon up there at Gold
yes.
King.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd like to hear more about that, but but it's your show asking me, not necessarily me interviewing you.
No, that's fine. Kib, it's one of the most amazing places that I've seen. The whole aspect of how that gold came in, and it might be great for another full conversation and another podcast.
Okay.
Just talking. You know what? If you don't mind, let's do a future podcast just on that, because there's been some questions that have come in from some other folks that I'm going to have as guests, that whole Pacific Northwest area and that area through there is a lot of comment and a lot of questioning about the tsunami gold. and the tsunami deposits
Sure,
that happened
sure.
in those areas. And I would love to just focus on that in an entire episode. The one
Okay.
thing I will tell you is that Gold King Creek, for being worked so many times since the late 1800s into the early 1900s, the gold is amazing, but the gold will also drive you crazy as what you're looking at, because there are only just a few actual source gold areas where you're getting into some really good residual, broken off the load material that's moved down a little bit. But the majority of the gold, if you take 5 pieces of gold and you look at them, you feel like they've come from 5 completely different areas. And it just, there are things that I even made me just kind of scratch my head and went, huh, I can't sit here and have a conversation with this gold. I can't ask it where it came from and where'd you go, little buddy? How'd you get here? Because it just doesn't make sense.
You actually had a conversation with Kib about this, not last year, but the year before, and he was trying to talk me into coming up there, and I'm interested. I definitely am. I just have to find the time. And to go up there and take a look at sources, as a geologist, to try and see if I couldn't do something. But I will make just one comment that goes with that, is that sometimes, gold from virtually the same source can look very different. There's a place in Nevada that I've gotten some really nice. In fact, I got a beautiful 20-gram wire gold specimen. In fact, it's not that far from where you and I and the two guys from England
Oh,
that
Gary and
we did
yeah,
the film.
Gary
And
and
Gary, yeah, remember when we did that, the four of us?
yes, sir.
Um, uh, it's that same general area. Anyway, I got this 20-gram piece and several others, very gold looking pieces. And like 35 feet away in a different line of material coming down the side of the hill from a vein, I got pieces that were just total electrum. They were just as green and pale as you can imagine. It's obviously the same system. It's just, you know, the mineralization, the fluids that come through there change over time. That's why you
Mhm.
get banded veins sometimes, where you have a banding of quartz and then banding of sulfides and banding of quartz. It's because the fluids change over time. You have a quartz rich solution, it drops quartz. You have a sulfide rich solution, it drops sulfides.
Right.
And so you can get some very different looking gold only short distances away.
Yeah, very true.
Anyway, so one of these days I want to go up there and look at that. That would be a lot of fun.
Kevin, you've been really quiet throughout all of this. Do you have any questions for Chris?
Well, and I've got to tell you, I've just been amazed. Just you just sit back and listen, and you kind of forget the one thing that I personally been chasing is to try to find these lobes of the ancient gravels where they went through things pretty quickly and they left those little side channels or little things like that.
Yep.
And I've been listening intently when you're talking about these indicators. And, I've followed a lot of the maps and a lot of the reports. When you're trying to find those side lobes and just finding that area, do you find those to be as rich as the original deposit, or did they leave them because they just weren't that rich?
Sometimes they left them for other reasons, just like they couldn't get high pressure water over there. You know, like you have a hydraulic mine, you set it up to mine the main channel and some little tributary channel off to the side. It's not worth building a whole nother a channel to bring water, another diversion ditch to bring water over to that small side channel. But it can be, every bit as rich as the main channel, sometimes even richer. Sometimes those side channels have more coarse gold in them than the big channels, which tend to have more fine gold.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like a modern stream. Those were streams at one time, and just like a modern stream, they have tributaries.
Right. And what I've been seeing is a lot of that, unfortunately, those lobes have been covered by, you know, organic materials and other
Well, that's a problem through the California mother lode country almost everywhere, is that, even in places where it's residual plasters, which is the kind of plaster I really like, is the residual type. um, you get organic material that then decomposes and builds up a soil layer, and you may have a super rich residual layer, but it's under, a foot and a half of pine needles and dirt and, other stuff that's, makes it tough to detect through it.
Right. Yeah, and that's the hardest thing is in a lot of times it'll be above the current road or the current stream area where it's
Yep.
up on the hill and it's even harder to detect.
Look for, because a lot of those things where you have the main channel is up high, the main channels tend to be at or comparatively near the top of the hill. um, those little side channels were above them, and so they're eroded away. And sometimes you have that situation like I was talking about earlier with the hill that was next to a little side channel that didn't have any actual gravel, but it had a lot of gold that was still there.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I was listening intently and I even was taking notes. I hope it didn't come on the microphone.
You know what? If it did, it doesn't matter. You're learning.
I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I think needs to be clarified, Chris, you were talking about you love working residual plasters.
Yeah.
Explain what a residual plaster is.
Okay, so not all placer gold comes from big old quartz veins. In fact, a lot of quartz veins, the gold in them is teeny tiny. In fact, a lot of quartz veins, the gold is so small that it's, dust size and no metal detector is going to see it. But a lot of times you have situations where you have contacts of different kinds of rocks, you have fault zones, and it may make a little quartz, it may have a little bits of stockwork veinlets and that kind of stuff, but not really enough for an old-time miner to have mined as a lode deposit. But there still may be enough gold in it that's worth prospecting. And there are a fair number of placer areas in the mother lode country that are of this type. They don't really belong to gravel. I mean, there's not an old channel there. There's not the rounded river gravel that you would see. Instead, the gravel is angular and doesn't look like it's been in a stream. And so you get these deposits on the surface or near the surface that are accumulations of bigger nuggets and coarser gold that real friendly to a metal detector.
Very true. I had one spot that I was working that I started finding some very nice flat pieces of gold with the metal detector. And they had some quartz attached to it, but not very much. It was very small.
Right.
And as I went up, I realized that the area that I was working was a, I just call it a quartz ribbon, just a rotted quartz ribbon that was embedded into a schist belt.
Yep.
And I just took off following that and hitting some very nice pieces of gold as I went along. Just,
Yep.
I think I probably took 20, 25 nuggets over the course of about a mile of walking this thing.
Wow.
That makes it easy.
Well, yeah, but it was, it's tough digging when you get into some of those things like that. All right, Kevin, do you have anything else? Any other questions?
Well, I did have one question. I actually, over the last couple days, saw this type of activity. Found it really interesting. Was we were in a lode area, but a lot of the material they put a shaft in later, but what they were doing was working surface material, and I would say it was probably down, maybe 10 feet from the surface, where they actually had cut through that lode material, got the good gold, and then that, of course, prompted them to actually cut some shafts in or some tunnels in to try to see if they could continue to follow it. Is that something that you can expect in lode areas where you'll have that primary material that's actually easier to work than, obviously you don't want to go in a mine, but is there some of that surface material that you'll find similar similar results.
Well, I've had situations where both in hard rock, they put down little prospect holes just to see what they can get, or in placers where they put down, short little shafts to reach bedrock. And I've found decent gold in both of those situations just detecting on the surface of the dump near the hole. You got to remember that the stuff on the top of the dump is the last stuff they pulled out, right?
Right.
And so, um, they may have taken the gravel on bedrock, or they may have taken, or if they hit a vein someplace. But if at the last they were pulling out some decent material before they actually hit what they wanted to do, or hit what they were trying to hit, um, you can find some decent gold working on those. There's a couple places in Nevada where they have a series of short, shallow shafts, and I've worked on the surface of the dump there and gotten some decent gold at doing that. And like I say, I've done it with lode deposits too, with little prospect pits.
All right. Yeah, that well I was looking at those cuz they're almost like ditches, fairly wide shallow ditches, and I thought I wonder if detecting on the side, on the sidewall, because there are some leftover material there that you could, you know, potentially pull some,
Sure,
some
sure. No,
specimens or things out.
it's certainly worth detecting. A lot of if you're just seeing little trenches, it's not really like a hole that they were putting down. A lot of times when miners knew that there was a vein going through there, like they might get some surface float, and they're thinking, okay, there's a vein here someplace. They would cut a series of trenches, hoping to intersect, to get through the surface soil and pine needles and whatever. Cut these trenches to try and intersect the vein, in the ground, so they could see where it actually was instead of just loose pieces of float all over.
Right, right.
Jumping in, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate what you just said about working the what's on the top of the pile was at the bottom of the hole. That was the last material that they worked.
Yep.
I have come up on so many people that were tearing these small dump piles. They're actually tearing them all the way down because they want to get to the bottom, because that's where the gold is. Some folks you can have the conversation with, some you just can't. There's been many a time where I've gone in, I'll rake down that top a little bit, and then when I get out of the gold, I walk away. I feel like we could actually go on for a whole lot longer. I'm going to have to break this into two pieces. And
We still haven't gotten to when to set down your detector. That was one of our topics.
it was one of our topics. So here's what we're going to do. I've got two, and that is a major topic for me. So
Yeah.
this is the end of part one of our conversations with Chris Ralph.